It has all the promises of a breakthrough, UN Resolution 2334, deeming settlements of the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem al-Quds to run against international law. But that's about it, with no sanctions against Israel or something to hold Israel accountable. In this edition of the debate, we'll discuss this resolution and whether it will have an effect on Israelis' illegal construction activities. Our guest joining us for this edition of the debate, Director at the Shafakna Institute for Middle Eastern Studies, Catherine Shagdam, joins us from London. Also, investigative journalist Carol Gould joins us from London also. I'd like to welcome you both. And Carol Gould, let me start with you. This resolution 2334 is a clear declaration that Israel's settlement activities are illegal, but there are other existing resolutions that have been unenforced for practically decades. So why should anybody expect anything from this if it has no teeth?
Well, you have to take into account what your announcer just discussed, which is that shortly we're going to have a new U.S. president. So we're certainly not going to have a president who is going to enforce such resolutions. Donald Trump wants to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he's certainly not going to oppose the building of more settlements, whether it's 600 or, as your announcer said, 5,600. So we're in an interesting situation where we've got a new president coming in who is certainly a staunch supporter of Israel and will certainly I think, take no notice of such resolutions. We do have to remember, there's been a lot of talk that this is such an unusual thing for the U.S. to abstain, but I mean, there was Resolution 1322 in the year 2000 when Bill Clinton, at the end of his administration, stopped, he instructed his ambassador to abstain, so therefore stopping a resolution passing about Ariel Sharon going to the Temple Mount, and also Resolution 1345 in 2002, when the Intifada was still raging, which referred to restricting access to Yasser Arafat's residence, the Makada. And again, President Bush 41, instructed the ambassador to abstain. So this is nothing new, but what is interesting about 2334, of course, is that many important countries like the United Kingdom have voted to support this resolution. In fact, it was unanimous. So this is something of it's a turning point. It's a bit of a watershed event, and it has upset and frightened many Israelis. I wouldn't say frightened, but world Jewry is rather upset that these countries, particularly the United Kingdom, because its Prime Minister Theresa May has just been giving speeches in staunch support of the Jewish community and of Israel in recent weeks. So it's created quite a stir. I think it's more to do with Obama and Trump and their tremendous dislike for each other, and also Obama's history of tremendous dislike for Netanyahu and Netanyahu's dislike of Obama. So this is about personalities and politics.
Well, you talk about the incoming U.S. administration. Catherine Shagdam, Donald Trump has called the UN just a club for people to have a good time. And after the vote, he said that things are going to be different after January 20th. Why is it that the U.S., when it has benefited from countless UN vetoes that they have held and that they have used, when it's to their advantage, everything's okay. But if not, then obviously Israel is reacting the way that it is.
Well, this is the problem that we have when we have countries such as Israel, the United States, who continue to invoke exceptionalism on the basis that they can. It is that simple. So when everything goes up to plan, that everything is fine and fair, but when they are being criticized or even challenged on the illegalities and war crimes that they're committing and human rights violation and countless other crimes, then, you know, everything is wrong and something needs to be done, and then suddenly the United Nations means nothing at all and it becomes some kind of irrelevant institution. First of all, yeah, I do actually agree that the UN is an irrelevant institution and that it doesn't actually serve the people whatsoever. It doesn't even begin to defend those principles it was founded upon. What it does, however, is act, you know, is pay lip service to the likes of Saudi Arabia or Zionism. This is what the UN has done for the past decades now. It has continued to excuse, and I would say to kind of, you know, whitewash those crimes that, you know, Tel Aviv has committed, that Riyadh has committed. Again, arguing exceptionalism and arguing threatening national security and whatnot, and trying to kind of hug the narrative and switch, I would say, claim victimhood, even though they're the ones committing the crimes. But the world community has gone along with that because, of course, America has aided Israel and supported Israel no matter what, because we are under the impression that somehow there is some form of legitimacy by just the sheer existence of Israel, that we have to support it and be silent to the crime they're committing against the Palestinians, and that Palestine never really existed anyway. Now, as for the lack of teeth, as you mentioned earlier, I completely agree with you. I don't think that anything's going to change. I think it was a political move. Maybe Obama wanted to somehow justify the fact that he received the Nobel Peace Prize, and he wanted to pretend for 5 seconds that he actually was a human being with some kind of a conscience, and that he very much disliked Benjamin Netanyahu. So he maybe wanted to do something on his way out and kind of make a point for the many times that he was actually insulted on his own ground, by Netanyahu when he came to Congress many times, and actually, slapped President Obama politically, of course, not literally. So yeah, I think it's a pointless resolution, to be fair, because nothing's going to happen. Nothing ever happens, because the world talks a lot but doesn't do anything when it comes to Israel, because they don't have the guts to do it, and they can't even fathom doing anything, because so much has been done and so much would need to be done now in terms of reparation that they don't even know where to begin. And it would be very difficult for Western power to actually rationalize now the kind of big flip-flopping and realize suddenly that, Tel Aviv is actually a grand war criminal, and we have aided them for many decades.
Well, Carol Gould, there's a certain degree of anger that, Netanyahu is known to lash out, but I'm looking at some of the reasons that I'm reading here for this Netanyahu's anger. It says that, and this is an unnamed Israeli official who has said, President Obama and Secretary Kerry are behind this shameful move against Israel at the UN. The U.S. administration secretly cooked up with the Palestinians an extreme anti-Israeli resolution behind Israel's back, also slamming the language of this resolution. Why is Israel particularly slamming the wording of this resolution, of which they have accused Obama and Kerry to be behind it?
Well, it's because there is a huge and very strong belief amongst world American Jewry and Israelis that Obama and Kerry have never been great friends to Israel. And also, as Netanyahu said, and I have to agree with him, come on. I mean, Catherine talks about human rights violations, criminal behavior. Come on, look at what's happening next door in Syria. For heaven's sake, what has the UN done for Syria, for what's going on in Yemen? I mean, the United Nations has been it's been useless. Look at the hundreds of thousands of people who have died in the past 4 years. In Syria, the millions of people displaced. It's one of the worst catastrophes I've witnessed, and I'm old enough to remember the Cambodian killing fields. It's since that period of time. There is violence and turmoil in Libya, in Iraq, and as I said, in Yemen. There's turmoil in Pakistan. There's a lot of trouble in Turkey now. And what is the UN doing? Nothing but getting so exercised about Israeli settlements. And yes, there is a great deal to discuss, and there is a great deal to settle on this issue. It has to, at some point, be brought to a head so that both sides are happy. But we're not talking about gigantic internecine strife and bloodshed and killing and murder in the hundreds of thousands and millions of people being displaced, like what's happening next door in Syria. And also, this discussion of aid to Israel. The United States has also provided an enormous amount of aid to Jordan, to Egypt, and to the PLO.
Well, it was $40 billion for the next 10 years, almost $40 billion. And that's my question to you, Catherine Shagnam, when it comes to U.S. And what they did in this UN session, but yet just recently passed and provided the almost $40 billion aid for the next 10 years. Is that to prolong the occupation?
Of course course it is a prolonged occupation. I mean, come on, the very premise of Israel is actually based on occupation. I mean, we need to remember, the horrors that Israel committed just because it could and just because it wanted to rationalize and, again, justify its very existence. So I'm not going to go and debate the why and the how. We know it happens, and now we have to kind of deal with the situation. But, enough already with trying to justify, those crimes that the Israelis are committing in the name of, some kind of weird legitimacy that they're claiming for themselves. It doesn't really even begin to make sense anymore, and arguing that they're not committing that many crimes in comparison to what is happening to Syria and Yemen. What has Yemen, and it's, Yemen is not, you can't compare Yemen and what is happening in Syria with what is happening in Israel, of course, unless you are relating to the same, form of radicalism and kind of, fascist-based political construct, which is Zionism, then I would agree with you. We are dealing with the same kind of, terror, because it's based on the same desire to genocide and cleanse away an entire people and a faith just because you can and just because, you feel like it. So yes, I would agree on this point. But Israel has committed horrendous war crimes. If anything, I would say that Israel actually sets a blueprint for what fascism looks like in the world today. Well, I think Wahhabism has done a great deal of what Israel has done to the Palestinians in terms of, stealing their land, denying their identity, disappearing their heritage, denying even their own history. So if you want to compare what is happening to Palestine, I don't think there is anything that you could compare it to. I don't think there's been greater tragedy than that of Palestine, because the world had stood by looking at the people literally, ebbing away, while we're arguing legality and morality and whether or not there's been, enough bloodshed, if enough people have died in one day. People have died for decades. So don't compare Syria, don't compare what is happening in Yemen either to what is happening in Palestine. Palestine does matter. We need to sort it out. We need to talk about it. And I don't really care if the world jury, as you mentioned, is upset. They should be upset, because great many crimes are being committed in the name of their faith and their own people. For what? So that you could have a slither of land that maybe someone give it to you like several thousand years ago. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, there has not been much when it comes to this so-called peace process, Carol Gould, with Israel and the Palestinians. And perhaps the war next door occupied the U.S. and, of course, other countries. Coming in with this Donald Trump, how do you see it? Because at this point, as you indicated, he is pro-settlement. He even has said they're not illegal.
Yes, of course, we know he's pro-settlement. He wants to move the embassy, the U.S. embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He will be a staunch supporter of the aspirations of the Jewish state. But, come on, let's look at, I have said this for years and years and years that I've been a broadcaster. It must be 10 years that I have been saying this over and over again. Let's get some decent leadership on the Palestinian side, on the Middle Eastern side, on all the countries I named before. Look at all the great leaders that the U.S. produced. Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Franklin Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, who started the League of Nations, and more recently, Martin Luther King, great leaders of their people. This is what is needed in that region. I mean, I asked Catherine, where are the leaders? Part of having a peace process and of coming together at the table and proposing making serious propositions is to have good, strong leaders who inspire their people. I don't see any of this in the region.
Well,
of course, now we've got Trump coming in, and it's probably going to be a very, very difficult time unless Israel elects a different leader, unless Netanyahu, unless his government falls.
Okay, the question was posed to you, Catherine Shagnam. Go ahead.
You want to talk about leadership? I'm going to give you leadership. We have, for example, Sayed Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. I think that when it comes to leaderships in terms of resistance, I think he sits quite up there. And then even in Iran, you have, Sayed Ali Khamenei. I think, again, in terms of leadership and inspiring people, I think he sits pretty high up there as well. And then, you have in Iraq, you have Ayatollah Sistani. If you want to talk about, again, resistance and calling for unity in the face of radicalism and Wahhabism, again, I think that you would find that he inspired quite a great deal of people. Now you want to go to Yemen, again, I would give you another Sayed, Abdel Malik al-Houthi. So again, if you want to talk about resistance and great leadership and inspiring people to resist the kind of tyranny which is coming out of Riyadh, which is coming out of Tel Aviv, you would find that, yes, ma'am, we do have leadership. We have our leadership, but the leadership that you deny, because this is the leadership that bothers you, because this is the leadership that speaks truth, and the kind of leadership that speaks popular legitimacy that you don't want to recognize because you would so much rather we agree with your Western leadership, with your kind of Western secularism, with your ideas, and please, let make them be made in Washington. We have leadership. You should learn to look at history. You should learn to turn on the TV and listen to what it is that our leaders have to say. And maybe, just maybe, you would learn something or two.
Carol Gould, do you have a response?
Let's look at Israel. It's the size of Wales. It's a tiny, tiny little country. And it abounds with art galleries, literary festivals, huge medical and technological institutions. It's basically, as a country on its own, is a peaceful country, full of creativity. It's an example to the region, an example to the world. And I don't understand how there is this constant banging on, as you have just said, about the West rejects the leadership. The West is ready to negotiate. I mean, we've had so many people going back and forth, going back to Warren Christopher, going back and forth in the 1990s, having meetings with Assad Sr., then Madeleine Albright, and more recently Hillary Clinton, and now John Kerry, trying to bring people together. And Israel is an example to these other countries of a tremendously productive and peaceful country, peaceful within its own borders, and with total equality for women, total equality for gay people. There's a gay pride parade every year. It's an example to other countries. So what I'm saying is that not just Palestine, but the other countries need creative leadership.
If I may speak, it's my time. It's my turn now. What do I say? I mean, you're referring to gay pride. I mean, seriously, this is kind of how you measure things. I get that you want to give this impression that liberalism is trendy and that we should all get behind that bus. But no, I'm sorry. Israel is not a peaceful country. The very creation of Israel was made in the blood of the Palestinians. So don't talk to me about peace. Don't talk to me about equality when Israel is the most sectarian country, racist country ever to have graced the face of the earth. You know, where Israel.
Come on, there are 1.2 million Muslims living in Israel. Inside Israel, Muslims living inside. That's not apartheid.
You're oppressing Christians. You're actually even making differentiation in between the kind of, you know, Jews that you have, whether they are coming from Eastern Europe, whether they are coming from North Africa or whatever. You know, so don't talk to me. You have a class system in Israel. It's very well known, very well documented. You know, you do not like, you have a fear of the other. You live in exclusion. Israel wants to be an island unto itself and reject the world and continue to live in this belief that everybody hates everyone because they are Jewish or Israeli. I get to tell you something. Nobody really cares. The only issue that people have is not about Judaism. Nobody cares about Judaism. Judaism is a beautiful, peaceful religion that should be respected, you know, but the people have a problem with Zionism. People have a problem with the kind of language coming out of Tel Aviv when they say it's okay to murder the children, that it's okay to rape women, because it should be used as a deterrent.
Okay. Let me jump in now. Give Carol Gould 30 seconds.
Do you know how many countries there are?
Go ahead, Carol Gould, 30 seconds.
That don't allow Jews to live there? That there are no Jews allowed to live or have a Jewish or Christian Bible in many Muslim countries now. So at least in Israel, you've got many faiths living together. There are over 1 million Muslims living inside Israel.
Awesome.
Catherine Shagdam, Netanyahu has announced and Israel has announced for more settlements. It seems like this year, which was a record year, is going to continue with this trend. What do you think the future holds with this incoming U.S. administration headed by Donald Trump?
Well, it's very difficult to predict the future, but if I go by what President-elect Trump has said, I don't think it's going to fare very well for the Palestinian. But then again, I think that they expect it and that they're used to it by now, as sad as it sounds, because everything that has been done so far to them has been horrendous, and it's getting worse. And I think that at the end, what Israel is trying to do is to disappear an entire people and actually claim that they never existed and what they had done was necessary and good. This is how Israel operates anyway. So unless something is done, I would say on the level of the Palestinian, where they actually really wake up and try to kind of react or do something a bit different maybe, or try to reach out to the international community and those who do want to listen to their humanity and morals and understand that people have a right to exist because they were there, and I don't see why they should be denied their lands, their history, their tradition, their faith, and whatever it may be, because they have a right to a nation state, as you know, as any other community, I would say. But we need to be a bit more rational when you talk about Israel and stop talking about exceptionalism and stop talking about legitimacy. What legitimacy?
Thank you, Director of the Shafak Institute for Middle Eastern Studies, Catholic Shandam. Also, thank you, Carol Gould, investigative journalist who spoke to us from London. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of The Debate from Mikhail Tagway and the entire team in the capital, Tehran.